The dimensional cannon aboard the Zephyrian flagship reached critical charge with 11 hours remaining before Earth's destruction. Dr. Alex Carter watched the energy readings from his damaged lunar facility while his team worked desperately to understand how the alien weapon functioned. The charging process is creating a quantum tunnel between dimensions, Katie Bell reported as she analyzed the data streaming from their sensors. If we could disrupt the tunnel at the right moment, we might be able to cause a feedback explosion that destroys their ship instead of our planet. Alex studied the readings that showed energy levels building toward something that could tear apart a world. The solution Katie proposed would require someone to fly directly into the dimensional cannon's energy stream at the exact moment when the tunnel formed. The timing would have to be perfect, Alex replied. And whoever makes that run won't survive? The energy discharge? Admiral Jake Morrison received the technical analysis while preparing his fleet for humanity's final desperate assault. The modified human ships had proven they could damage Zephyrian vessels, but stopping a planet killer weapon would require sacrifices that went beyond normal military operations. All ship commanders, this is Admiral Morrison, he announced to the fleet. We have one chance to save Earth, and it requires someone to make a suicide run into the dimensional cannon. I'll be taking that mission personally. Lieutenant Tracy Cole was monitoring communications from her fighter squadron when she heard the Admiral's announcement. The young pilot had lost her entire family during the initial invasion and had been looking for a way to make the aliens pay for what they had done to her world. Admiral, this is Lieutenant Cole, she said over the secure channel. My fighter has been modified with the quantum disruption equipment, and I'm already in position for the attack run. Before anyone could respond, Tracy accelerated her small fighter toward the massive alien flagship. Her ship was fast enough to avoid most defensive fire and small enough to get close to the dimensional cannon without being detected until it was too late to stop her. Tracy, abort your attack run immediately, Admiral Morrison ordered, but she had already switched off her communication system and committed to a course that would end with her death and hopefully save her planet. The fighter streaked toward the Zephyrian command ship while alien defensive systems tried to track something too small and fast for their weapons to target effectively. Tracy could see the dimensional cannon charging and knew she had only minutes to reach the optimal position for disrupting the quantum tunnel. For Earth and for everyone they killed, Tracy whispered as her fighter entered the energy field surrounding the alien weapon. The quantum disruption device activated at the same moment the dimensional tunnel formed, creating a cascade failure that tore through the flagship's power systems. The explosion that followed destroyed 3 Zephyrian cruisers and crippled the dimensional cannon, but it also opened a window of opportunity that lasted only minutes. Admiral Morrison immediately ordered all human forces to attack while alien systems were offline. Colonel Danny Rodriguez led ground forces in simultaneous assaults on every Zephyrian installation across Earth. The aliens were scrambling to restore power and communications while human fighters emerged from every hiding place to strike at targets that had been heavily defended just hours before. All units hit them while they're blind and confused, Danny commanded as his forces overran the Los Angeles garrison. This is our chance to end the occupation permanently. Captain Nina Walsh coordinated similar attacks across Europe while resistance cells struck at alien positions throughout the continent. The quantum cascade failure had disabled Zephyrian technology across the entire fleet, giving humanity the advantage they needed to turn the tide of battle. Commander Vexstar watched his carefully planned conquest dissolve into chaos as human forces attacked everywhere simultaneously. The dimensional cannon was destroyed and his fleet was crippled by continuing system failures that spread faster than his technicians could repair them. All ships retreat to minimum safe distance and prepare for emergency departure, Vexstar ordered, but many of his vessels could not respond due to the cascade damage caused by the quantum disruption. Dr. Carter activated every remaining Titan weapon at the same moment, creating a quantum storm that engulfed the entire solar system. The massive energy discharge overloaded every piece of Zephyrian technology while somehow leaving human equipment unaffected. The quantum storm is interfering with their dimensional energy links, Katie reported with excitement. They can't retreat to their home dimension, and they're trapped in normal space where our weapons can hurt them. The final space battle began with human ships attacking alien vessels that could no longer repair damage or call for reinforcements. Admiral Morrison led the charge in his flagship, while fighter squadrons commanded by Captain Rick Thompson swept through the crippled enemy fleet. All ships concentrate fire on the command vessel, Jake ordered. End this war by taking out their leader. The battle for the alien flagship lasted 6 hours, with human forces fighting their way through corridors designed for beings twice their size. President Linda Hayes had joined the boarding party personally because she wanted to face the alien commander who had tried to enslave her species. High Commander Vexstar made his final stand in the flagship's command center, surrounded by his elite guards. The Zephyrian leader could not understand how a primitive species had defeated an empire that had conquered 300 worlds. "How did you defeat us?" Vexstar demanded as human soldiers surrounded his position. "Your technology is centuries behind ours, and your numbers are insignificant compared to our forces." President Hayes stepped forward to face the alien commander directly. Her uniform was torn and stained from the fighting, but her voice carried the authority of someone who spoke for an entire species. "You conquered 300 worlds of sheep," she replied calmly. "We're not sheep. We're wolves, and wolves don't surrender to anyone." The formal surrender came 12 hours later, when the last Zephyrian stronghold on Mars capitulated to forces led by General Paul Henderson. The alien empire that had seemed invincible just months before had been broken by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Dr. Carter and his team began studying captured Zephyrian technology that would advance human science by centuries. The quantum manipulation techniques and dimensional energy sources would allow humanity to travel between stars and take their place among galactic civilizations. 6 months after the final battle, Admiral Morrison commanded the first Liberation fleet as it prepared to depart for star systems still under Zephyrian control. The ships were built using a combination of human engineering and captured alien technology that made them superior to anything the Empire could field. Citizens of oppressed worlds, this is Admiral Morrison of the Earth Liberation Fleet. He broadcast on frequencies that reached across the galaxy. "Your suffering ends today. We're here to teach the universe what we learned on Earth." The message continued with an offer that no Zephyrian ultimatum had ever contained. Humanity came not as conquerors, but as liberators offering freedom to species that had never known anything but slavery under alien rule. President Hayes addressed the people of Earth from the rebuilt White House as human ships departed for distant stars. The woman who had refused to surrender when facing impossible odds now led a species that would carry the message of freedom across the galaxy. "Today we begin a new chapter in human history," she announced. "We go to the stars not as servants or slaves, but as free people helping others find the same freedom we fought to preserve." The final scene showed human ships arriving at their first target world, broadcasting the same ultimatum Earth had once received, but with a crucial difference. Where the Zephyrians had demanded submission, humanity offered liberation and the chance to stand up against oppression. The age of Zephyrian dominance was ending one world at a time as humanity taught the galaxy that some species would never kneel, and that freedom was worth fighting for regardless of the odds. Earth's defiance had become a beacon of hope that would burn across the stars for generations to come. Jake Morrison felt the ship shake violently around him as alarms screamed through the corridors. He grabbed the nearest wall panel and tried to steady himself while the transport vessel spun out of control. The lights flickered and died, leaving only the red emergency glow to guide his way to the escape pods. The mission was supposed to be simple. Take medical supplies to the outer colonies near Kepler 442c and return home within 2 weeks. Jake had done dozens of these supply runs as a lieutenant in the Earth Defense Corps. Nothing ever went wrong on the quiet routes through empty space. But something had hit their ship hard, and now the hull was breaking apart. Jake reached the pod bay just as another explosion rocked the ship. The blast threw him against the metal wall, and he felt something crack in his ribs. blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. He could barely see through the smoke and sparks flying. From damaged circuits, most of the escape pods were already gone or destroyed. Only one remained intact, and Jake crawled toward it as the floor tilted under him. The ship was falling toward the moon below, and he had maybe minutes before it hit the surface. His hands shook as he tried to work the pod controls, but years of training kicked in and he managed to launch. Just as the transport broke in half, the escape pod tumbled through space toward the barren moon. Jake looked through the small window and saw nothing but gray rocks and dust. No atmosphere readings on his scanner. No signs of life anywhere. If his emergency beacon worked, it would take weeks for a rescue ship to reach this far out. His oxygen would last maybe 3 days. The pod hit the ground hard. Jake felt his shoulder pop out of place, and his head struck the control panel. Everything went black. When he woke up, Jake found himself lying on something soft that glowed with pale blue light. His head pounded and his shoulder throbbed with pain, but he was breathing normal air. That was impossible. The moon had no atmosphere, and his pod was damaged. He should be dead. Jake tried to sit up and saw them for the first time. 3 tall figures stood nearby, watching him with what looked like concern. They were unlike anything he had ever seen. Their bodies seemed to be made of living crystal, translucent and beautiful, with light flowing through them like water. They moved gracefully, without making any sound. One of them stepped closer and spoke, but not with a voice. The words appeared directly in Jake's mind, clear and gentle. "You are safe now, small one. We found you broken and brought you to our healing chambers." Jake tried to speak, but only managed a weak whisper. "Who are you? Where am I?" "We are the Vithani. You are in our city beneath the surface of this world. Your flying shell was destroyed, but you still lived. We could not let you die." Another of the crystal beings moved forward. This one was smaller and seemed younger, with brighter lights dancing through its form. "I am Kethel, a healer. Your body has many injuries, but we can help you recover. Our bioresonance technology can repair the damage." Jake looked around and saw that he was in a vast underground chamber carved from living rock. The walls sparkled with embedded crystals that provided warm light. Strange plants grew everywhere, unlike anything from Earth. The air smelled sweet and clean. "Why did you help me?" Jake asked. "You don't even know what I am?" The first being, who seemed to be the leader, sent a feeling of sadness through the mental connection. "I am Zafara, an elder of this community. We know what it means to be alone and dying far from home. Many of our people have suffered such fates." Over the following days, Jake learned about the Vithani and their tragic history. They had once been a great civilization spread across many worlds. They were master terraformers who could turn dead planets into gardens using their bioresonance abilities. But a powerful alliance called the Consortium had driven them from world after world, claiming their planets for themselves. They said, "We were dangerous," Cathal explained while treating Jake's injuries with glowing crystal tools. "They feared our technology and wanted our worlds. So they hunted us across the galaxy until only a few thousand of us remained. The Vithani had fled to this dying moon as their final refuge, but even here, death was catching up with them. Strange plague was spreading through their population, corrupting their crystalline bodies and dimming their inner light. Hundreds had already died, and more were getting sick every day. Jake watched Kethel work and noticed how the healer's own light seemed weaker than the others. "You're sick too, aren't you?" Kethel's form flickered sadly. "Yes, the plague will take me soon, as it has taken so many others, but we cannot stop trying to heal those we can." As Jake grew stronger, he began to understand the Vithani's technology and biology. His background in bioengineering helped him recognize patterns in how their bodies worked. The plague was attacking the connection between their organic and crystalline parts, slowly killing them from the inside. Jake spent hours in their crystal laboratories, studying samples and data with Vileth, one of their scientists. The Vithani were amazed by human adaptability and creative thinking. They had been trying to cure the plague for decades, but Their approaches were too rigid and traditional. Your people think differently than we do, Veleth observed. You see possibilities, where we see only problems. Working together, Jake and the Vethani scientists began to develop new ideas. Jake introduced concepts from human medicine while they shared their bioresonance techniques. Slowly, a possible solution began to emerge. The breakthrough came when Jake realized the plague wasn't natural. Someone had designed it specifically to target Vethani biology. But the creators had made one mistake. They hadn't expected the Vethani to work with another species. Human biochemistry could provide the missing element needed for a cure. Jake worked day and night, combining human medical knowledge with Vethani technology. He used his own blood samples to create a hybrid treatment that could bridge the gap between silicon and carbon-based life. It was dangerous and experimental, but it was their only hope. The first test worked. A young Vethani named Solami recovered completely after receiving Jake's hybrid cure. Within days, they were treating dozens of patients, and all of them showed improvement. But their celebration was cut short when long-range sensors detected ships approaching the system. The consortium had found them. Zafara gathered the elders to discuss what to do. Jake listened as they debated whether to fight or try to hide deeper underground. Most of them were weak from the plague, and they had no weapons that could stop a consortium fleet. We could evacuate to the deep caverns, one elder suggested. They might not find us there. They will keep searching until they find us, another replied. They always do. Jake felt a growing anger as he listened to their despair. These gentle beings had saved his life when they could have just let him die. They had shared their knowledge and worked with him to cure their people. They deserved better than to spend their final days hiding in caves. I have to leave, Jake told Zafara that evening. If a rescue ship finds my beacon, I can get word back to Earth about what's happening here. The elder's light dimmed with sadness. We understand. Your people need to know you are alive. Zafara handed Jake a small memory crystal that pulsed with soft light. This contains the history of our people and proof of what the consortium has done to us. If you survive, please show your people who we truly are. Jake held the crystal carefully. I promise. And I promise that humanity will remember what you did for me. As Jake prepared to activate his emergency beacon, he looked back at the Crystal City one last time. The Vethani had shown him something he had never expected to find among the stars. They had shown him that kindness and compassion could exist, even in the darkest corners of the galaxy. He just hoped he would live long enough to make sure the universe knew about it. Jake Morrison stood in the main conference room of Earth Defense Headquarters, holding the glowing memory crystal in his sweaty palm. Around the large table sat the most powerful people in human space, and most of them looked at him like he had lost his mind. The rescue ship had found him 3 days after he activated his beacon, floating in a damaged escape pod near the dead moon. He had been babbling about crystal people and alien plagues. Admiral Lisa Carter leaned back in her chair and shook her head. Lieutenant Morrison, you suffered severe head trauma in that crash. The medical team found evidence of concussion and oxygen deprivation. What you think you remember might not be real. Jake felt frustration building in his chest. He had expected this reaction, but it still hurt to see the doubt in their eyes. Admiral, I know how this sounds, but I have proof. The Vethani gave me this memory crystal. It contains their entire history. General Paul Davis laughed and pointed at the crystal. A glowing rock is not proof of anything, son. Our scientists looked at it and found some kind of bioelectric field, but that doesn't mean it came from aliens. You could have picked it up anywhere on that moon? The only person who seemed interested was Dr. Amy Wells, the head of xenobiology research. She had been studying the crystal for 2 days and found its structure unlike anything in their databases. The energy patterns are incredibly complex, she said quietly. I don't think our current technology could create something like this. Secretary of State Tony Richardson cleared his throat and looked around the table. Even if we accept that, Lieutenant Morrison met these Vethani, we need to consider the bigger picture. The consortium controls most of the known trade routes and has military power far beyond ours. We cannot afford to make them our enemy over some aliens we've never met. Jake stepped forward and placed the memory crystal on the table. These aren't just some aliens, sir. They saved my life when they had every reason to let me die. They've been hunted across the galaxy by the consortium, and now they're dying from a plague that might have been created specifically to kill them. Admiral Carter frowned at Jake. Even if that's true, what do you expect us to do about it? Earth has 60 million people spread across 12 colonies. The consortium has hundreds of worlds and thousands of ships. This is not a fight we can win. Jake felt his anger rising. So we just let them die? These beings have technology that could help us cure diseases and terraform dead worlds. They could be our greatest allies, but only if they survive long enough. Doctor. Wells picked up the memory crystal and examined it closely. If Lieutenant Morrison is telling the truth about this cure he helped develop, the implications are enormous. The combination of human and Vethani medicine could revolutionize healthcare. General Davis waved his hand dismissively. All theoretical. We're talking about risking human lives for aliens that might not even exist. The meeting went on for hours, but Jake could see he was losing. The council was too afraid of the consortium to take any action. They had decided that Jake's story was either a hallucination or an exaggeration. As the officials filed out of the room, Jake felt defeated. Only Dr. Wells stayed behind. She approached Jake and spoke in a low voice. I believe you, she said. The crystal's energy signature is unlike anything we've seen, and the mathematical patterns embedded in its structure suggest an incredibly advanced civilization. Jake looked at her with hope. Can you access the memory stored in it? Dr. Wells nodded. I think so. Our quantum computers might be able to interface with the crystal's bioelectric field, but it will take time. 2 days later, Dr. Wells called Jake to her laboratory. She had connected the memory crystal to a massive computer system that filled most of the room. Holographic displays showed swirling patterns of light and data. I managed to decode part of the crystal's contents, she said excitedly. Jake, what these beings went through is horrible beyond imagination. The first images that appeared showed beautiful crystal cities on dozens of worlds. The Vethani had created gardens in space, turning barren planets into paradises. Their bioresonance technology could accelerate plant growth and create breathable atmospheres. In decades instead of centuries. Then came the war. Consortium fleets appeared at Vethani worlds without warning. The crystal beings tried to negotiate, offering to share their terraforming knowledge in exchange for peace. But the consortium wanted their worlds, not their friendship. Jake watched in horror as the memories showed orbital bombardments that turned entire crystal cities to glass. Vethani refugees fleeing in ancient ships as their homeworlds burned. Children separated from their families as evacuation ships were destroyed by consortium fighters. They never fought back, Jake whispered. Even when the consortium was killing their people, the Vethani refused to use their technology for weapons. Dr. Wells nodded sadly. They're pacifist by nature. Violence goes against everything they believe. That made them easy targets. The worst memories came from the final battles. The consortium had developed new weapons specifically designed to shatter Vethani crystal bodies. Entire populations were wiped out in minutes. The few survivors fled to remote systems, hoping to find somewhere safe to rebuild. Jake saw Zafara as a young being, watching her home city crumble under consortium fire. He saw Kethel's family die in a refugee camp attack. The gentle healers and terraformers had become the galaxy's most hunted species, guilty of nothing except being in the way of consortium expansion. We have to show this to people, Jake said firmly. Everyone needs to see what the consortium really is. Dr. Wells hesitated. The Defense Council ordered me to keep this classified. They're afraid it will cause panic or push people toward war. Jake felt something harden inside him. Then we go around the Defense Council. That evening, Jake contacted Steve Martinez, an investigative reporter who had covered military scandals before. Steve had always been fair to soldiers and might be willing to listen to an unusual story. They met at a small cafe in downtown Geneva. Away from military surveillance, Steve listened carefully as Jake told his story, occasionally asking questions about details. When Jake finished, the reporter sat quietly for a long moment. "This is either the biggest story of the century or you're having a complete breakdown," Steve said finally. "But you don't seem crazy to me. You seem angry." Jake leaned forward. "I am angry. These beings saved my life and showed me kindness I didn't deserve. Now they're hiding on a dead moon waiting to die, and nobody wants to help them." Steve made his decision. "Show me the proof." The next morning, Steve's news network broadcast the first images from the Vethani memory crystal. The footage of beautiful crystal cities being destroyed by consortium warships spread across human space within hours. Social media exploded with outrage and debate. Jake appeared on the evening news to tell his story directly to the public. He spoke about waking up in Vethani healing chambers, about working with their scientists to cure the plague, about the gentle beings who risked everything to save a stranger. "They could have let me die in that wreckage," Jake said to the camera. "They owed me nothing, but they chose to help anyway. Now they're facing extinction and we have the power to save them." Public reaction was swift and powerful. Protest groups formed outside defense headquarters demanding action. Crowdfunding campaigns raised millions of credits for refugee aid. Veterans organizations called for military support of the Vethani, but the most important response came from an unexpected source. Captain Helen Brooks of the exploration vessel New Horizons sent a message directly to Jake's personal account. "I've seen your interviews," she wrote. "My crew and I volunteer to take supplies to your crystal friends. We don't need government approval for a humanitarian mission." Jake felt hope returning. Maybe the politicians were too scared to act, but ordinary people understood what was at stake. The Vethani had shown humanity something precious. They had proven that kindness could exist even in a hostile galaxy. Now it was time for humanity to return that kindness. Jake began making plans for a mission that would either save the Vethani or get them all killed trying. Either way, he was not going to abandon the beings who had refused to abandon him. The memory crystal pulsed softly on his desk, holding the history of a dying species and the hope that someone might still care enough to help them survive. Jake Morrison crouched in the darkness of the ancient lava tube, listening to the sound of explosions far above. The consortium had found the Vethani hiding places and was systematically destroying every crystal formation on the moon's surface. Through his communication device, he could hear Captain Helen Brooks coordinating the evacuation from her ship in orbit. "Seismic charges detected in Sector 7. Helen's voice crackled through the static. "They're collapsing the main entrance. Tunnels." Jake turned to Zafara, who stood beside him with her crystal body dimmed to almost nothing. The elder Vethani was trying to stay strong, but Jake could see the fear in the way her inner light flickered. Around them, dozens of Vethani younglings, huddled together, their small forms glowing softly in the tunnel darkness. "How many more exits do we have?" Jake asked quietly. Veleth, the scientist who had worked with him on the plague cure, pointed deeper into the tunnel system. 3 passages lead to the old mining shafts, but they are unstable and may collapse if the consortium continues using heavy explosives. Dr. Amy Wells knelt beside a group of injured Vethani, using human medical supplies to treat wounds that their own bioresonance healing could not fix fast enough. The consortium ground forces were using weapons specifically designed to disrupt Vethani crystal structures, and the damage was unlike anything the peaceful beings had ever seen. "We need to move the younglings first," Amy said without looking up from her work. "They're the most vulnerable to the weapon frequencies." Jake nodded and activated his communicator. "Sam, what's your status up there?" Sam Carter's voice came back tense with concentration. "I've got 3 shuttles ready for pickup, but consortium fighters are patrolling the surface. We'll need a distraction to get the kids out safely." Sam was Admiral Carter's daughter, but she had volunteered for this mission against her father's direct orders. Her piloting skills were legendary, and Jake trusted her to get the Vithani children to safety if anyone could. But the consortium blockade made every trip to the surface extremely dangerous. The sound of grinding metal echoed through the tunnels as consortium drilling machines broke through another barrier. Jake could hear the heavy footsteps of armored soldiers getting closer. Combat medic Danny Rodriguez checked his weapon and looked at Jake grimly. "They're maybe 20 minutes out," Danny said. "We need to decide who stays and who goes." Kethel, the healer who had saved Jake's life, stepped forward with determination in his crystal form. "I will remain with the archives. Our people's knowledge must not be lost." Jake shook his head firmly. "Nobody stays behind. We're all getting out of here." But even as he said it, Jake knew the math was impossible. They had 43 Vithani refugees, including 15 younglings and only 3 small shuttles. The consortium forces were closing in from multiple directions, and there was no time for multiple trips. Zephyra touched Jake's shoulder with her crystal hand. "Young human, you have done more for us than we ever dared hope. But some sacrifices are necessary for the greater good." Jake felt anger building in his chest. These gentle beings had already lost so much. They had been driven from world to world, watched their families die, and survived genocide attempts. Now they were talking about more sacrifice when they should be talking about fighting back. "No," Jake said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "no more sacrifice. We're going to save everyone, and we're going to make the consortium pay for what they've done." The explosions above grew louder, and dust began falling from the tunnel ceiling. Through his communicator, Jake could hear Helen Brooks shouting orders to her crew as consortium warships engaged the human relief. "Vessels in space." Sam Carter's voice cut through the chaos. "Jake, I'm reading massive seismic activity. They're trying to collapse the entire tunnel system." Jake looked around at the frightened faces surrounding him. The Vithani adults were trying to comfort their younglings while preparing for death. Dr. Wells was frantically packing medical supplies. Danny Rodriguez was counting ammunition that everyone knew would not be enough. Then Jake remembered something Veleth had told him during their work on the plague cure. The ancient lava tubes connected to thermal vents deep in the moon's core. The Vithani had originally settled here because their bioresonance technology could tap into geothermal energy. "Veleth, can your people still access the deep thermal systems?" Jake asked urgently. The scientist's crystal form brightened with understanding. "Yes, but it would require many of us working together. The energy output could be enormous." Jake felt a plan forming in his mind. "Enormous enough to overload consortium equipment?" Kethel looked confused. "We do not use our abilities for violence. It is against our nature." Jake grabbed the healer's crystal shoulders. "This isn't violence, this is survival. And sometimes survival means fighting back." The grinding sound of consortium drilling machines grew louder. Jake could see lights moving in the distant tunnels as enemy soldiers searched for survivors. There was no more time for debate. "Everyone who can't fight, get to the shuttles now," Jake ordered. "Danny, take the younglings and get them to Sam's ships. Amy, go with them and keep the injured stable." Dr. Wells started to protest, but Jake cut her off. "This isn't a discussion. Those kids need a doctor, and you're the only one we have." As the evacuation began, Jake worked with Veleth and the remaining Vithani to set up their bioresonance network. The crystal beings positioned themselves at key points throughout the tunnel system, their bodies glowing brighter as they connected to the moon's thermal energy. "The resonance cascade will build slowly," Veleth explained. "But once it reaches critical mass, the energy feedback should disable any electronic systems within several kilometers." Jake nodded and moved to his position near the main tunnel entrance. Through his night vision goggles, he could see consortium soldiers approaching with heavy weapons and scanning equipment. Behind them, massive drilling machines continued tearing through the rock. Danny Rodriguez returned from escorting the evacuation group, breathing hard from the run. "First shuttle got away clean," he reported. "Sam's coming back for the second group." The consortium soldiers were close enough now that Jake could hear their voices echoing through the tunnels. They were speaking in their harsh alien language, but their intent was clear. They planned to capture any Vithani survivors for experimentation and kill anyone who resisted. Jake felt the hair on his arms stand up as the bioresonance energy began building around him. The Vithani were channeling more power than their bodies were designed to handle, but they continued focusing their energy into the thermal network. Their crystal forms glowed so brightly that Jake had to shield his eyes. Energy cascade approaching. Critical threshold, Veleth announced through their mental connection. All organic beings should seek shelter immediately. Jake pressed himself against the tunnel wall just as the first consortium soldiers rounded the corner. Their advanced scanning equipment suddenly went dead, and their weapons stopped functioning. The soldiers looked around in confusion as their armor's power systems failed. Then the real cascade began. The bioresonance energy exploded outward through the rock itself, following natural crystal formations and metal deposits. Every piece of consortium technology within kilometers suddenly overloaded and shut down. Drilling machines seized up. Weapons became useless, and communication systems died. In the sudden silence, Jake heard something he had never expected. The Vithani were singing. Their voices joined together in a haunting harmony that echoed through the tunnels like music, made of light itself. They had found a way to fight back without betraying their peaceful nature. The disabled consortium soldiers retreated in panic, unable to function without their technology. Above ground, their ships found themselves drifting powerless as the energy pulse reached them through the moon's metallic core. Sam Carter's voice came through Jake's communicator, filled with excitement. Jake, whatever you just did worked. 3 consortium ships are dead in space, and their fighters are autoritating back to their carriers. Jake looked around at the exhausted Vithani, their crystal bodies now dim but still alive. They had found a way to defend themselves that honored both their peaceful nature and their need to survive. Zafara approached Jake with gratitude glowing in her crystal form. "You showed us that there are many ways to fight," she said softly. "Sometimes the greatest victory comes not from destroying your enemy, but from proving they cannot destroy you." As the evacuation continued and the consortium forces regrouped, Jake realized this was only the beginning. Word of what happened here would spread across human space and beyond. The galaxy would learn that the Vithani were not helpless victims, and that humanity would stand with those who chose kindness over cruelty. Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the emergency broadcasts from across human space. Her daughter Sam's desperate transmission from the Kepler system had reached Earth 6 hours ago, and the reaction was unlike anything she had ever seen. The footage of consortium forces executing Vithani healers was spreading through every communication network, and humanity was responding with rage. "Admiral, we're receiving volunteer requests from every colony in the outer systems," her communications officer reported. "Mars Colonial Guard has declared independence specifically to join this fight." Lisa felt torn between her duty as a military commander and her love for her daughter. The Defense Council had ordered her to maintain Earth's neutrality, but Sam was trapped on that moon with hostile forces closing in. Every minute she waited increased the chance that her daughter would never come home. Captain Bill Hughes was already loading his merchant fleet with volunteers and supplies on Europa Station. The cargo ship captain had converted his entire transport operation into a military convoy without waiting for government approval. His crews were welding armor, plating to cargo holds, and mounting whatever weapons they could find. "Bill's got 47 ships ready to jump," his first officer told anyone who would listen. "Miners, haulers, passenger liners, even a few racing yachts. Everyone wants to help those crystal people." On Mars, Captain Nina Torres gathered her Colonial Guard officers in the Red Planet's main command center. The footage from Kepler had reached Mars before Earth's official response, and Nina had made her decision quickly. "The Defense Council wants us to stay neutral while innocent beings are slaughtered," she told her officers. "But we swore an oath to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Today we honor that oath." Engineer Lucy Foster worked frantically in the Jupiter orbital shipyards, leading teams to retrofit civilian vessels with military equipment. Her crews had been working for 12 hours straight, welding weapon mounts and installing shield generators on ships never designed for combat. "These mining lasers won't win any space battles," Lucy explained to her exhausted workers, "but they'll punch holes in consortium armor just fine." Back on Earth, the public reaction continued growing stronger. Protest crowds surrounded government buildings demanding military action. Student groups led by teenager Ashley Moore organized fundraising drives that collected millions of credits in hours. Even children were contributing their allowances to help the Vithani refugees. Dr. Amy Wells broadcast her research findings from the Vithani memory crystal to every human medical facility. The combination of human and Vithani healing technology promised to revolutionize medicine across known space. The cure Jake had helped develop could save countless lives if the Vithani survived long enough to share their knowledge. "This is bigger than one species helping another," Amy explained in her broadcast. "This is about proving that cooperation creates something greater than either side could achieve alone." Admiral Carter received another transmission from Sam showing consortium reinforcements jumping into the Kepler system. Her daughter's voice was steady, but Lisa could hear the fear underneath. "Mom, they've got 6 heavy cruisers and at least 20 fighters. We can't hold them off much longer." Jake and the others are still evacuating civilians from the underground cities. The breaking point came when Director Frank Lewis of the Jupiter Mining Consortium contacted Admiral Carter directly. Frank's deep space mining operations gave him access to the most heavily armed industrial ships in human space, and he was willing to contribute them all. "Admiral, my miners are ready to fight," Frank said firmly. "These consortium bastards think they can commit genocide while we watch. They're about to learn what happens when you threaten someone under human protection." Lisa Carter made her decision. She activated the emergency command frequency and began issuing orders that would either save her daughter or end her military career. "All ships of the Third Fleet prepare for immediate departure. We are deploying to the Kepler system under emergency humanitarian protocols." Her communications officer looked shocked. "Admiral, the Defense Council specifically ordered us to maintain neutrality." Lisa's eyes hardened with determination. "My daughter is under fire, and innocent people are dying. The Defense Council can court-martial me later." Word of Admiral Carter's defiance spread through human space faster than official channels could stop it. Within hours, volunteer fleets were converging from every direction. The Mars Colonial Guard launched first, followed by the Jupiter Mining ships and Bill Hughes' merchant convoy. But the most surprising response came from species that humanity had never met before. The aquatic Alanethi emerged from the deep ocean worlds where they had been hiding from consortium persecution. Their sleek bioships joined the growing armada, communicating through complex mathematical patterns that human computers could barely translate. "We know the Vithani suffering," the Alanethi ambassador transmitted. "We have hidden in deep waters while our crystal friends faced extinction, no more hiding. Now we swim together toward freedom." The energy beings called the Thrum appeared. Next, their ships looking like captured lightning moving through space. They had been the first species targeted by the consortium and had spent centuries as refugees in the empty spaces between stars. "The small flesh beings show courage the galaxy has forgotten," the Thrum collective consciousness announced. "We will burn bright beside them against the darkness." Jake Morrison received word of the approaching fleets while helping evacuate the last Vithani from the deepest caverns. The crystal beings were amazed that their rescue of one human had sparked such a massive response across multiple species. "Your people's hearts are larger than their ships," Zafara told Jake as they waited for the next shuttle. "We saved one life, but you have awakened an entire galaxy." Admiral Carter's fleet jumped into the Kepler system just as consortium reinforcements were preparing their final assault on the moon. The human ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, followed by waves of civilian volunteers and alien allies. The consortium commander found himself facing the largest multi-species fleet assembled in over 1,000 years. Human military vessels flew alongside mining ships and pleasure craft. Alanethi bioships moved like schools of fish through space. Thrum energy vessels crackled with barely contained power. "This is Admiral Lisa Carter of the United Earth Defense Force," she broadcast on all frequencies. "You are attacking beings under human protection. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The consortium response was to open fire on the nearest human ships. It was exactly the mistake Admiral Carter had hoped they would make. The attack gave her fleet legal justification for everything that followed. "All ships, you are free to engage," she commanded. "Show them what happens when you threaten our friends." The battle that erupted around Kepler 442c became known as the moment everything changed. For the first time in centuries, the consortium faced united opposition from species they thought they had crushed. Human determination combined with alien technology created combinations no one had imagined possible. Bill Hughes rammed his cargo ship directly into a consortium dreadnought, shouting, "This is for the Crystal Kids," as his ship exploded against enemy armor. Lucy Foster's retrofitted miners used their industrial lasers to carve through consortium shields like they were cutting asteroids on the moon's surface. Jake watched the space battle through Sam Carter's shuttle windows as she evacuated the final group of Vithani survivors. The young pilot was flying like her life depended on it, dodging debris and weapons fire while keeping her passengers safe. "Jake, look at that," Sam said with wonder in her voice. "I've never seen anything like it." Above them, the combined fleet was winning. Consortium ships designed to fight individual species found themselves overwhelmed by coordinated attacks from multiple directions. Human adaptability, Alanethi speed, and Thrum energy weapons proved to be an unstoppable combination. The battle ended when the surviving consortium ships retreated toward their home territory. For the first time in their history, they had been defeated by the species they had spent centuries oppressing. As rescue ships landed on the moon to collect the remaining evacuees. Jake held the Vithani memory crystal and realized its message had spread farther than anyone imagined. The galaxy had seen proof that kindness deserved protection, and beings across known space had chosen to stand up for that principle. Admiral Carter's voice came through every ship's communicator as the fleet began forming up for the journey home. "Today we proved that no one fights alone when they fight for what's right." The consortium wanted to make the Vithani extinct. Instead, they created the largest alliance for freedom the galaxy has ever seen. Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the newly built space station, watching human and Vithani children play together in the crystal gardens below. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Kepler 442c, and the moon now looked completely different. Where once there had been only barren rock and hidden caverns, beautiful crystal structures now grew toward the sky like living art. The space station orbited what everyone now called Haven, the first world of the Galactic Liberation Alliance. Ships from dozens of species came and went constantly, bringing refugees from consortium-controlled worlds and supplies for the growing coalition. Jake had never imagined that his rescue by the Vithani would lead to something so enormous. Admiral Lisa Carter approached from behind, her footsteps quiet on the metal deck. She had been promoted to Supreme Commander of Alliance forces after her victory at Kepler, but she still made time to visit the station regularly. Her daughter Sam was now one of the top pilots in the combined fleet. "The latest reports from the outer systems are encouraging," Admiral Carter told Jake. 3 more consortium worlds have declared independence this month. Their empire is collapsing faster than anyone predicted. Jake nodded and continued watching the children below. Human kids were teaching Vithani younglings to play soccer, while the crystal children showed their human friends how to make light patterns with their bodies. The sight still amazed him every day. Dr. Amy Wells joined them at the observation window, carrying a tablet filled with medical data. Her research combining human and Vithani healing techniques had already saved thousands of lives across Alliance space. The bioresonance treatment centers she had established were curing diseases that had plagued multiple species for centuries. "The integration is happening faster than we hoped," Amy reported. Vithani healers are working in human hospitals, and our doctors are learning bioresonance therapy. We're sharing knowledge that benefits everyone. The transformation hadn't been easy. The first months after the battle had been chaotic as refugees poured in from across the galaxy. Species that had been hiding for decades suddenly emerged, seeking protection under the Alliance banner. The logistics of feeding, housing, and protecting so many different beings had pushed human resources to their limits, but somehow it worked. Captain Bill Hughes, who had survived ramming his ship into the Consortium dreadnought, now coordinated the massive relief efforts. His merchant fleets carried supplies to refugee camps and newly liberated worlds. Lucy Foster's engineering teams built habitats, suitable for dozens of different species. The most dramatic changes came from unexpected alliances. The Alanith ocean dwellers shared their bioship technology with human engineers, creating vessels that could repair themselves and adapt to different environments. The Thrum energy beings taught human scientists new ways to generate and store power that revolutionized space travel. Jake's personal transformation had been just as dramatic. He now served as the Alliance's first interspecies ambassador, helping negotiate between dozens of different cultures and biological types. His small apartment on the station was filled with gifts from grateful species and communication devices that let him speak with beings across the galaxy. Zephyra entered the observation lounge, her crystal form glowing with the warm light that Jake had come to associate with contentment. The Vithani Elder had become one of the Alliance's most important leaders, using her people's terraforming knowledge to plan new colony worlds for refugees. The council meeting went well, she reported to the group. The consortium has agreed to peace negotiations, though they're demanding we return all their former territories. Admiral Carter laughed grimly. They can demand whatever they want. Every world that's joined us did so voluntarily. We're not giving anyone back to their oppressors. The peace talks had been going on for months with little progress. The consortium still controlled vast regions of space, but their military had been weakened by constant defections and failed attempts to retake liberated worlds. More importantly, they had lost the fear factor that had kept other species submissive for centuries. Jake turned from the window as Captain Nina Torres entered the lounge. The former Mars Colonial Guard officer now commanded the Alliance's rapid response fleets, ready to intervene whenever the consortium threatened peaceful species. Her ships had prevented 3 attempted genocides in the past month alone. We intercepted consortium communications from the Vega sector, Nina reported. They're planning another attack on the Kelter refugee colonies. My fleet can be there in 18 hours. Admiral Carter nodded. Take whatever ships you need. We're not letting them hurt anyone else. As the military officers discussed deployment plans, Jake reflected on how much had changed since his crash on the dead moon. The galaxy that had once seemed dominated by cruelty and oppression now buzzed with cooperation and hope. Species that had never met before were working together to build something better. The transformation wasn't limited to military action. Alliance scientists were sharing research that accelerated technological development across all member species. Artists and musicians collaborated on works that combined different cultural traditions. Trade networks developed that bypassed consortium control entirely. Dr. Wells showed Jake her latest research data. We've identified 17 more species that could benefit from bioresonance therapy. The Vithani healing techniques are compatible with almost any silicon-carbon-based biology. Jake smiled as he read the reports. Kethel would be amazed to see how far his medical knowledge has spread. The Vithani healer had become something of a legend throughout Alliance space. His willingness to risk his life saving Jake had inspired countless others to choose compassion over fear. Medical centers across the galaxy now displayed images of the gentle crystal being who had refused to let a stranger die. Through the station's windows, Jake could see the latest arrivals. A convoy of Thrum energy ships was escorting a group of refugee vessels from the Andromeda border. Each ship carried families fleeing consortium persecution, seeking the safety and freedom that the Alliance promised. Sam Carter's voice came through the station's communication system. Jake, you need to come to the main hangar. We've got some special visitors. Jake made his way through the station's corridors, past laboratories where human and alien scientists worked side by side, past common areas where dozens of species mingled freely. The hangar was crowded with Alliance personnel waiting to see who had arrived. The airlock opened, and Jake felt his breath catch. A group of Vithani younglings emerged, their crystal bodies bright with excitement. These were children who had been born after the liberation. The first generation to grow up free from fear and persecution. Behind them came Veleth, the scientist who had worked with Jake to develop the plague cure. The elder Vithani approached Jake with gratitude glowing in his crystalline form. Ambassador Morrison, Veleth said formally, then switched to the more personal mental communication. Jake, my friend, look what your kindness has created. Jake looked around the hangar at the incredible diversity of beings all working together. Humans, Vithani, Alanathi, Thrum, and a dozen other species he was still learning about. All of them free because one human had refused to abandon those who had shown him kindness. I didn't create this, Jake replied. The Vithani created it when they chose to save a stranger instead of letting him die. Admiral Carter joined them, her expression serious but hopeful. The consortium delegation has agreed to formal surrender negotiations. They want to discuss terms for ending the war. Jake felt a mix of relief and caution. Peace would be welcome, but the Alliance had to ensure that the consortium could never again threaten peaceful species. What are their conditions? He asked the Admiral. Carter smiled. They don't get to make conditions anymore. They're negotiating from a position of weakness, and they know it. The galaxy has seen that their empire can be defeated. As Jake watched the celebration around him, he thought about the memory crystal that had started everything. Zephyrus' gift had shown humanity the truth about consortium oppression, but more importantly, it had shown them what they could become when they chose to protect the vulnerable instead of ignoring their suffering. The station's main screen activated, showing a live feed from across Alliance space. On dozens of worlds, beings of every description were working together to build a better future. Former enemies had become partners. Fear had been replaced by hope. Jake Morrison, the engineer who had once been just another face in Earth's military, now stood at the center of the greatest transformation in galactic history. He had kept his promise to the Vithani, ensuring that the universe remembered their kindness. In return, their compassion had revealed humanity's true potential. The boy who had crashed on a dead moon had helped birth a new age among the stars. And it all began because some crystal beings had refused to let a stranger die alone.